if you're following what I'm saying up to this point, you're probably aware of the fact that I'm talking about time for a caretaker government. I tried to read some old stuff there from quite a number of years ago that is as good today, I think, as it was when I wrote it. And I've got a few other bits that I may or may not have recorded onto this camera that I read. But the question that most people put to me after they got the idea, we could do it this way, we could do it very simply in the electoral process. The pressure to do it more quickly, of course, is always with us because serious damage is being done by this mismanagement for everyone. The planet, even the people who are doing the wrong, the bullies and these fraudulent this police state auxiliaries that they developed. I mean, all these people are really going down the wrong road, and I'm concerned for their well-being, karma. I'm not into the enemy syndrome. I think people are just misled and confused. I think that by and large people are redeemable from evil thoughts and actions, and mostly the people who are carrying that kind of seed of anger and with them are people who have suffered, and so we don't need to beat them down and complete the suffering, because it goes around and around and around, and we have to stop that circling. So back to the idea of agenda. So I thought, how about all of the above? And that works rather well. That's aorta, all of the above, aorta, and that's pretty close to the aorta. What is it? The main aorta. Yeah, the aorta. So aorta and aorta are very close together in letters, but all of the above agenda would clearly, that's really what politics is all about. Now, philosophically, if you approach agendas, you have to see that the changes have become a big block in the political alimentary canal of our way of doing business, and so what we're getting in Parliament is just a lot of people yelling and screaming, and I guess they're essentially rhetorical farts and no progress. So I sat down and I began to sort of unravel the puzzle of our times, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, and anybody who's been around Vancouver and Canada and the world by way of observing the progression towards a more and more fascistic state, which seems to be always following the feudal concept of a few doing it all, is with us again, and of course we'll wither on the vine again, as it inevitably will, as common sense prevails. However, the agenda, the aorta agenda, as I figured it out, is just my own gift, if you will, for serious consideration. I believe we have to acknowledge our history. I believe we have to acknowledge our history as being one of rape and plunder and violent oppression of tribal peoples pretty much everywhere. That seems to be an element in the white races who themselves were chased out of Western Europe and probably Northern India as well by the raiding hordes with the Genghis Khan and those great warrior killer ape types, or however we have to define them. They used to be known as the Han, and I think that idea was still carried on quite late into the 20th century. However, let's forgive them all for their idiocies, and let's move on to how can we resolve that. Well, clearly, in Canada, especially Western Canada, we have a golden opportunity, because already there's never been anything approaching honourable settlement, and maybe honourable settlement has not really ever been achieved around the world without the complete elimination of, or in other words, genocide of a particular dominated group. That kind of genocidal is ongoing in Canada and the United States, and that's evident by the number of women whose children are taken away from them, the amount of abuse which has followed in families as a result of the amount of abuse which was wreaked upon generations of people in these schools, which were, I'm sure, well intended, but people by monsters. Frankly, people around children at a certain point become monsters, and there's horrors, and these of course are carried with the children and become oppressors themselves. That's all well understood, and that circle has to be broken. There are ways of doing that, of course. I mean, if you have a man who's behaving badly because he wants to get cocaine to fulfill his needs, well, give him the cocaine and then find him something useful to do with the rest of his time. You're probably highly motivated, but of course the idiocy of our times doesn't permit that. Similarly, all of the above agenda, and for similar purposes, and that is purposes of kindness and creating a peaceful and harmonious state for our children and grandchildren, we have to acknowledge honourable settlement with the Aboriginal people. And the only way, in my view, to do that is to outright, flat centre say, hey, crimes have been committed in the name of domination of land, and therefore we're going to have a complete restitution of title to the land to the Aboriginal peoples, and those tribes and clans are well defined and being well researched, and in many cases they still have the vestiges of families who are vying to be seen as the dominator, hereditary chief. And of course, with the interference of the Canadian government, we've had all these elected chiefs and band councils, and a total contradiction of the traditions and values that were inherent in the philosophies of the people before the coming of the white man in his perverted sense of right and wrong, which is, if you've got a bigger stick, you're right and I'm wrong. So I believe that is a priori, in other words, in the beginning, a necessary step. Now, how the Aboriginal people rise to the occasion and resolve that, the fact of the matter is it's all determined by jurisdiction. And right now we have a structure where the invading people, that is us white people, whether we're what you would say, like my own case, settlers, or whether, like in the case of my children, I guess they would be natives with some native rights and so on. There's obviously a sliding scale of rights here, but certainly the rights of the first people have to be absolutely a priori taken care of, and that means to say there will be no homelessness, there will be no more violence, there will be no misuse and abuse of the powers of various bureaucracies to make life miserable for Aboriginal people. And we as the people now who have offended so badly, I think we have an absolute necessity to make things right in a very practical and on-the-ground sense, so that we can practice serious kindness in our relationship to our hosts, because after all, they are our hosts and we are the guests, and we've, I think, behaved very badly. Certainly the 50 years I've been here, things have improved, but very, very little. Now, moving on from that, what does that mean in practical terms? Well, what it means in practical terms is that if all the land belongs to the tribal people, then they have to retain some jurisdiction over it. Well, in my last talk, I talked about the none of the above option, and am I running out of time already? Good Lord, yeah. I better wrap this up, but I'll do another one shortly following it that goes on a bit. The way we would do that, of course, is to buy the land back on the basis of the taxable value. The land then is held in trust by the original people of this land, that the rights and securities of their well-being is assured, that we transcend the current monetary state, and that can be done, as I say, by buying the land back and using the equity which is generated to establish a caretakership on the land for all the people of British Columbia. And the none of the above option is a way of achieving that. I hope that all makes sense. If it's a bit confusing, it's probably my explanation of it. I see it rather simply in my mind. And when people say, "Oh, John, that's absolutely impossible," I think not. I think not only is it not impossible, but it's absolutely vital. God bless you all. Bye-bye.